Hello and welcome to SimCast, the higher education simulation podcast. My name's Lawrence Hill and I chair the simulation group in the School of Health Sciences at UEA Norwich.
Hello everyone, welcome to SimCast. My name's Tony Jeremy and I'm the academic lead for simulation-based education at UEA Norwich.
Exciting episode for us today because we are joined by Dave Shablak and Will Belk, who are fellow podcasters in the world of simulation.
This is a content creation, simulation amalgamation.
Yeah, definitely. So, chaps, maybe we could throw to you, Dave, and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do and why you do it.
So my name is David Shablak. Been in simulation 14 years, and I've worked with all manner of type of medical education learner. Why I do it? Because it's just in my soul, and I have to. I love every bit about it. I have mannequins in my garage, and 3D printers and all that stuff. So even when I'm not working, I tend to be doing something healthcare simulation related. So it's what I love.
Great, thank you. And Will?
Yeah, so my name is William Belk. I'm the director of Sim and Innovation for a larger medical company here in the United States. So I oversee training for flight nurses, flight paramedics, et cetera. And I've been doing this specifically simulation in the aeromedical realm for full-time for about 6+ maybe 7-ish years. And then, David and I have run the SimGeeks podcast going back to 2019. So that started out at IMSH in 2019. Which was, again, as we were talking before we started recording, we're 1,500 miles apart or, several thousand kilometers for you guys over there in the UK. And so David and I met via the internet, as things often go, and started sharing ideas back and forth. And at some point said, you know what, we should start sharing this with everybody else as well. And so we met at IMSH for the first time in San Antonio back in 2019. And SimGeeks just kind of grew out of that, even though it took us close to a year before we sent that first episode out.
Amazing. And we've probably got some valuable lessons to learn from both of you because you've got a 4 or 5 year head start on us.
Yeah, absolutely. So SimGeeks then, what's the mission for SimGeeks? What's it trying to achieve? Who are you reaching? What's the sort of stuff that you guys normally talk about on the podcast?
David, you take this one.
Okay, so the format that we went with was we wanted to take topics that might be big, scary, or hard to approach, and we wanted to make them approachable, make it easy, digestible, and then try to give resources from that point on. And the biggest thing is, what do we cover? Well, we cover whatever our audience wants. So we've done the nerdy operations topics, moulage is of course a favorite, but we've gone into, Will went into Arduino and we do silicone and 3D printing and things like that. But we also talk about SSH accreditation and, how hard it is to hire an operations person. Or, the most recent is, does RPG gaming have a place in medical education, which will show you that it definitely does. So we try to, take all of these topics and show you, how to frame them and that they're not scary and they're pretty approachable and try to help people.
Yeah, I mean, and from day one, David and I had two very different backgrounds. Aside from the fact that both of us were traditionally trained as paramedics, neither of us had been practicing paramedics at all by the time we started doing this. And so we came at it from David bringing a really heavy operations background. And at the time, I was very much 50-50 between technically being a full-time educator but working for a sim program that had no operations specialist. And so I was also basically acting as our operations specialist. And so we've always tried to attack things from multiple angles, but ultimately at the end of the day, anyone should be able to pick up any SimGeeks episode and learn from it. Nothing is ever taught at a really high level. It's meant to be broken down and easily digested, no matter who you are or what your background is.
Cool. It's good, and to be fair, that is what the impression I've got when I've picked up a few episodes here and there, and just been like, oh yeah, instantly, this is relatable and usable content. That's that. I guess
always, something to learn, which is great.
Yeah, definitely.
So together, you're SimGeeks, but Dave, you've also got a YouTube channel. This old mannequin, right?
Correct. Yep.
Tell us
I
a little
do
bit
that,
about that.
With my side business, Simulation Tech, which is usually the name, the misnomer or the nomer that I use everywhere on the internet as well. And yeah, I do This Old Mannequin. We do shorts. I say we because it's, I don't know why, but it's me. And I try to do more of the operations focused or technical, or I've worked with vendors and things like that. And again, it's just more of trying to bring the educational topics out there and raise all ships. So raise all boats.
Raise all boats. Yeah. I mean, that really aligns with, I think, with the way that we've set out as well. That's kind of and I guess that's why it's such a pleasure to get to talk to you guys today about this, because, we've been plowing a similar furrow, except on the other side of the Atlantic, right? So, our whole mission is similar to that, is, to bring everyone with us and to kind of generate this kind of community around simulation.
And your message is definitely getting out there, because we presented at a conference in the UK a couple of years ago now, and Dave, your name was mentioned as someone that we definitely had to touch base with, and so we're so glad we're able to do that with you now.
Yeah, was it Alex Saunders put us in onto you? Yeah, so Alex Saunders,
and the
legend of simulation,
and the simulation technicians network on Facebook, which is a massive group, isn't it? And it's just great to see these communities bubbling away under the surface. And I guess
proudly
what we're trying
British
to do
owned group. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was just something that came up that was like, "Oh, are you one of the moderators?" I'm like, no. This is all the Brits. This is proudly British owned.
So you're both paramedics by background. What was it that made you take that initial leap into simulation based education?
Just go to Will.
So, yeah, for me, it was a transition. At the time, I was working as a flight paramedic, and where I really got started into it. So I'd taught on and off for paramedic programs and EMT programs. I'd used mannequins in the past, but about 14-ish years ago, give or take, don't quote me on that, I was working for a different aeromedical program than I am now. And we didn't have a base level educator. And so somehow I just magically got promoted into this non-paying gig where I had to train people. And so I was traveling around a lot within our program, but also teaching at hospitals and doing, simple ACLS, PALS, BLS updates for the local physicians and the residents. And I don't know exactly when it happened, but at some point I realized, like, even when I was still an active clinician, I cared more about the education. I cared more about the mannequins than I really did about continuing clinically in the practice I was doing. And so a couple of years later, I transitioned into in my current position with the company I'm with now. And I flew for them for several years, and then an opportunity presented itself to become an education manager for a region. And so I took over that. And it was probably 2 years after that where David and I, got together. But again, that transition continued, where I was enjoying myself more learning about simulation methodology and digging into debriefing and learning about the technology that's available to us. And that became more of my passion than even the medicine that I was teaching at the time. And
it's so funny
slowly transitioned that way.
It's a similar story this side as well. We're separated by an enormous body of water, but actually, in terms of a career path. So I'm a paramedic by background as well. And, probably about 10 years ago, sort of partially transitioned into took a full-time education job in higher education. And then it's actually been in the last kind of 18 months, 2 years that I've sort of come to realize that my transition from clinician to educationalist is kind of pretty much complete. I'm not a practitioner.
I'd call myself an educationalist first, and a registered healthcare professional second now, probably. And probably should be the other way around.
And like something you said then really caught my attention, because you were like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to do it for free," or you've had this promotion and you're going to do it for free. It's, for me, that's because as educators, we're all like, "Yeah, of course you do it for free," because being an educator is a way of being, right?
Yeah, we've said this before, haven't we? It's definitely a way of being.
Yeah. And
it was
Dave. You said that, like, you've got mannequins at home in the yard and at home, so it's kind of become part of your everydayness.
Exactly. Yeah, I do. It's people ask me, like, a long time ago when I started, building all this up. Somebody pulled me aside and was like, "Why are you doing all of this extra work? What do you do it for?" And I'm like, "I do it because I have to. Like, I can't just sit still. I'm a builder, and I like to, like I said, just help everybody. So it's just why I do it."
And it's like you said because I have to do it, and that's not because someone's making you. It's because you are compelled to do it.
And I don't know whether it's the same in the US, but in the UK, when you see really good simulation done in NHS hospitals and HEIs and stuff, whilst there might be a little bit of a kind of a background and strategy behind it, it's normally from the goodwill of the people who are really keen and enthusiastic about simulation as an educational technique.
Is that the same in the US and in Canada?
I would say most likely. The people that, especially in our circles, but the people that we run into at conferences every year, there's a passion there, right? I don't think anyone is forced into this or gets a degree in simulation that wasn't already actively and deeply involved in the community to begin with. And so I would say, yeah, I think that if you're looking at high quality education being delivered in any form, it's almost always done by somebody who cares more about delivering the education than they do about the paycheck they're receiving. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be getting paid or that we should do all this for free. I just feel like every time we go to a conference, we meet these extremely passionate individuals and they share information openly. Like there's very little that is, behind closed doors or secretive. And I do feel like people are more motivated by the work they're doing than the actual pay or the job titles they're receiving.
I couldn't agree more. I'm actually in my first Sim Center's new location right now because they had better internet that's down the street from my day job now. And I got paid exactly what I made as a paramedic, which at the time was not very much at all. And I did it for years and years and raised a family on it. Well, I did it because I just loved it. And, I even told them when I was visiting before this came on is, my heart's still here and I do it because it made memories. I worked with amazing people. We built things that helped make medical providers that go off and save lives. And it's inspiring.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting. So for me as well, it's like, because it's the passion that drives that simulation forward a lot of the time. When it comes to things like trying to find money and budgets for things, again, in the UK, it's difficult. I think we're at a point now where in our school, we're trying to strategically take simulation a lot further forward. And with that comes an extra cost. Now, obviously, in the US, the healthcare and the education system is very different to what it's like in the UK, particularly in terms of funding. What challenges, if any, do you have with that kind of thing?
So I'll take this one first, then I'm going to pass it to David. I am very lucky in that I do work for a for-profit medical provider, right? So that's a thing here that you guys don't deal with over there. No. And so my company, right, has to generate profit in order to turn around and fund us. But because of that, and because education is so important to things like patient quality and patient safety, I'm very well funded. My program, when we ask for things or as long as we can justify them or show what we need, it's almost always guaranteed to get approved. It may not be, hey, yeah, go do that right now. It may be, hey, you need to do that next year or the year after. But I've been very lucky in that like right now, I'll give you an example. I have aging obstetric mannequins. They're at this point, they're all 8, 9, 10 years old. They're well outside of their manufacturer's lifespan. And so I just went and requested the purchase of 6 new mannequins, and it was a non-issue, right? We wrote it down last year that we needed them, and we knew it was coming up. And so for me, I live in a very different world than a lot of people do as far as working at a nonprofit or working at a university or a hospital. There is budget constraints. It is difficult to get things funded. I can't speak to that as far as my current role, just because I'm very lucky in where I'm at. But I have dealt with that in the past, right? Where something as simple as a $6,000 ACLS mannequin was a multi-year request. You ask for it over and over and over again. And so, David, I know you're working for a government gig and you've worked for university hospitals in the past. So I know you've had a different experience even than I deal with.
But even jumping off what you said, the difference is you've been with your current employer for a very long time. You've built a lot of programs. You have laid the groundwork to make it that way. Whereas nobody's just going to walk up to somebody off the street that they hire and say, here's buckets of money. You have had to put in the planning. You've had to put in mannequin life. I know, because we've talked about this, is that you've put in, lifespan of mannequins. You've built these programs, the things that, the topics that come up over and over and over again. So it's been a long standing period to get to where you're at now. And it's only a testament to all of your hard work that you're there. But yeah, in the place that I'm in currently is where I started and where I cut my teeth. And to say that we were underfunded is putting it very, very kind. And somebody's like, some people are like, well, where did you learn all of this stuff? We had to, because we had to make sure we met the learning objectives for nothing. And then, in my current place, I approach things with a very frugal mindset. And they're like, why? don't save that. Just throw that away. And I'm like, but
that in turn feeds your creativity, right? You know, what can I do with some pre-made silicone, and how can I address the challenges that I've have? And we've spoken before to technicians across the country who've had those similar kind of.
I was watching
problems.
one of your videos the other day, actually, Dave, and you were kind of extending the longevity of a pre-filled syringe of adrenaline, of epinephrine.
Oh, yep.
And it's little things like that. You know, it's like that's probably not a high tariff item, but even so just give us a flavor of some of the other kind of creative and kind of making stuff that you do in your role.
So in my role currently now, not as much, but in my past, and a lot of this was with the people I worked with. So maybe I didn't build all of these things because I never want to take credit for something that's not mine. But, you know, we had a learning objective that popped up that our residents were doing video laryngoscopy, and they were very, very good at it, but they've lost the skill to be able to do direct laryngoscopy. And so we had to think about, or the educators had to think about, well, okay, how do we put the skill in there that we can do that? Where does video laryngoscopy fail? And it's like vomit or blood. So we ended up taking one of our mannequins that was a out of vogue, you know, mannequin that we weren't using anymore, and we built it as it still had pulses, it still had all this. It was a SimMan Classic, which I still say is a great mannequin for certain tasks. And we hooked up a 2-gallon pump sprayer and rerouted some of the internals to make sure that it would still function and not foul it out. But it would then vomit a mixture of Coke, beer, water, and then we would shove pizza into the airway, and it would achieve that learning objective very quickly. And it would, you know, give them the idea of every time they would go into the VL, we would hit them with the vomit, and it would come out pretty darn good. You know, we did perimortem C-section, so, you know, adult female, pregnant, you know, in her final months of pregnancy, and she's in a car accident, and we would send that in, and we had to build that. And at the time when they built that, they did not have a pediatric or even an obstetric mannequin. So we had to take an adult male at the time SimMan Classic and build up things to be able to meet those learning objectives out of couch cushion foam and chamois and all the stuff that we could find and we could buy with the pittance of budget that we had left.
And I think that's the thing, is that being an educator and just wanting to meet those outcomes and having that opportunity to be creative. And it's one of the really gratifying things about being a simulation educator is like, how do we solve this learning problem? What do we need? What's the bare minimum we can get away with to achieve that objective? And it opens the door to doing stuff like that. It's just really cool.
Well, it's the epitome too of explaining that you don't need the highest end, high fidelity XYZ sim or mannequin to accomplish a learning objective, right?
Amen.
We can spend $200,000 on a
again.
C-section model, or we can make one out of some couch foam, right? Like thing is that it really drives home that the more creative you are, the less budget you actually need. And so sometimes it's the lack of budget that drives the creativity. And other times it's, hey, if I create this, I can save that money and use it somewhere else, right? And put that money somewhere else within my program.
And getting on one of my soapboxes, it's all in the orientation. It's all in how you set the scene, the ground rules, and how serious you do take it is to how they will engage with that. If you make it a joke, if you don't set the ground rules and tell them, you know, this is how I expect you to perform, this is how I expect, you know, this is inbounds, that's out of bounds, and set the scene properly, they're never going to take a $200,000 mannequin seriously, let alone a towel patient that you made in a hotel room because you guys all got stuck somewhere in a snowdrift or whatever.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be expensive to be high impact as well if you're taking it seriously. We did a midwifery day recently where we took the whole of our sim center and turned it into different midwifery units, and we were doing a C-section. So we had the real patient on the table, and then we had the C-section kind of lower abdomen half, and then got the what was a third year student playing that role to just pop it between the legs and did the C-section. And then the level of believability was high because they'd invested in it.
Yep. Some of the highest impact sim Yeah, exactly. So I think some of the highest impact sim is that my favorite, and I'm sure we've talked about this on the podcast before, but was I was doing some pediatric assessment skills for paramedic students, and we wanted to do a group situation with a baby and a relatively stressed out parent. So I played the role of this parent. I did go a bit extra, which I regret, but there was
a bit of overacting,
a little bit overacting, which wasn't that. But yeah, it was only a tiny bit. But all I had was a little baby kind of low tech mannequin wrapped in a towel, and I had a YouTube video playing the sound of a baby with a really rip roaring croup, and I just cuddled the phone to my chest, and then when they came in, I was just like, "Shh, don't wake up my baby." And that was it, and that just we let the sim evolve from there. And some of them are like, "Yeah, that's fine. Let me work around you, and I'll be opportunistic and have a listen." And some were like, "You need to put the baby down, sir." And that's when it really escalated.
Step away from the baby.
That's when it escalated big time. Yeah.
But those are all great debrief points. And I mean, exactly. I love tiered simulation, like you were saying, and I don't think that gets used enough, because for the perimortem C-section, when they go down that rabbit hole, is that there is cardiac tamponade. So we have to bring in something they can ultrasound to do that, and then they have to have another trainer that we unveil or we roll in that they can do the pericardiocentesis. And this is all while they're pounding away on the chest and they're doing all these things. But you can just redirect, and it's all in how you set the scene, and it's all in how you unfold it to whether it's believable or not. And it all works if you do it right.
Just out of interest, in the sim that you do, Will, like, do you either of you, in fact, do you do much like routine simulation? So I mean, we talk a lot. We're both paramedics. Anaphylaxis. We're talking about perimortem C-section. We're talking about resuscitation. Do you ever do like
the mundane stuff?
This older person's on a blood thinner and they've had a bumped head. They've got a hematoma and they don't want to go to hospital.
Absolutely. So just kind of without getting too deep into the weeds, what I do is I focus all of our simulation scenarios around our needs assessment, right? So I look and I see where is it that we as a company of 1,500 nurses and paramedics, where are we struggling? And if that comes back as, hey, we're having a hard time with something as simple as deciding on the right pressor or pulling the trigger on when to do a blood transfusion, then that's where our simulation is going to take us, right? And so sometimes you find out that things that you never thought were going to be a problem, like simple ACLS and CPR, all of a sudden have become an issue. And then we'll design a scenario around, you know what, maybe it's time for an ACLS update. And what I've learned from doing this over the years is don't take anything for granted, right? We're talking about extremely experienced nurses and paramedics. None of these people are unintelligent. None of them are new to their jobs, right? You don't just walk in and be a flight medic one day. Like you spend like your entire career kind of working towards that. Yet we still find that at times we're seeing the same, we'll call them mistakes, errors, issues that you would expect from younger people. And I truly believe it's because we quit focusing on that in education and we focus on the higher and higher level stuff like you're referencing. So yeah, we don't do a whole lot of, hey, you're going to walk into this clinic and check this patient out, because that's not the environment that our people work in.
Fair enough.
But we do occasionally run something simple like, hey, let's run a standard code, or let's pick up a pediatric with a respiratory illness.
Do you ever, just out of interest, because it's flight medicine, do you ever do any kind of like aviation related simulation that has an impact on the clinical care?
Yes. So we are, historically the answer would be no, but right now we're actually working through some of this stuff. So part of our sim lab right now is there's an hour scenario that is built around an in-flight emergency. So what they're having to do is having to handle the radio, having to communicate with air traffic control to make an emergency landing while also focusing on a patient that's in front of them. And so obviously in that scenario, in all reality, yes, we always want to be focused on our patients, but the safety of the crew has to come first, right? And so they're left to make those choices, to communicate amongst themselves and to balance that situation of life or death, but also taking care of their patient.
And this for me is where the beauty of proper simulation, what I'm going to call proper simulation. And so Lawrence and I have been doing a piece of work in our organization where we're looking at the different simulation modalities, trying to get our educators to understand the difference between skills. We're calling them skills, drills, and simulation, and trying to understand the differences between those. And for me, simulation teases out those human factors, those non-technical skills,
the latent problems that you didn't know were going to emerge until you do something a little bit more complex.
But I think thinking about going back to your point earlier about I think a lot of people fall into that trap of having to just simulate the extraordinary and thinking that's what we do. And even when we did that document and looked at skills, drills, and simulation, you were using like the term technical skill. And I said to you, well, what about non-technical skills? Why aren't we teaching those as skills and drills as well? We just expect our learners to be able to deal with the real world messiness, particularly when we throw them into a sim and be fine. And my experience has been that actually the technical proficiency is often very good, but it is actually the messiness, the communication, the decision making, the prioritization. That's the bit which trips people up.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the main focus of what we're seeing right now in IPE and interprofessional, right? Is making sure that people communicate with each other. We have that closed loop communication. We're respectful. We understand each other's roles. In our setting, it's a little different because it's a very small team. You have a pilot, a nurse, and a paramedic, but that still exists, right? Who's going to do what? How are we going to communicate this? Making sure that I understand what you as my partner have completed, or that we're on the same page to take care of this patient. And those things need to be teased out in that sim as well, so that all of that goes in. So when we're scoring someone on a simulation scenario, it's not just, hey, did you provide decent patient care? It's, did you interview this patient? Did you assess them appropriately? Did you work as a team to care for this patient? All of those things are equally as important of whether or not you knew the correct dose of a specific medication in the circumstance.
Dave and Will, you've been, so you came together by opportunity? Instagram chance. Since you've been working together on the podcast, what have you learned from each other? And what have you learned about each other?
I'm going to go first on this because there is not a week that goes by that David doesn't send me some absolutely cool shit that he's working on in his garage. And in the early days, it was one of those, like, we were learning some things alongside each other, and we were bouncing ideas back and forth. And that's how we got to know each other. It was like, hey, I'm 3D printing this thing. What do you think? And then he would send me stuff, and we went back and forth. At some point, my world kind of slid a little left and went more academic, and I went out and did my master's degree, and I became a director, and now I have all this management shit I have to do. And David has stuck firmly into this making badass things in his garage mindset. And so his skill set has just blown away. And so every week he sends me something. And back in the day, I might have said, I could probably figure this out. And now I'm like, I have no fucking clue how you do that. Right? This is awesome. And so a lot of my technical know-how, or even simple things of, like, if I'm shopping for something, we have a small group of us, it's David and I and a couple other guys, but we will share information back and forth literally every day. Our group chat is one of those things that if anyone ever sees it, we're all fired, but it's just constant information being passed around. And so David has been kind of my resource for anything cool, technical, or that requires something mechanical. He's the person that I go to. I need help with.
Having seen some of David's videos, I can definitely see that. Yeah. Maybe do you think, to someone who sees that and maybe might be a little bit inspired by that, is also perhaps a little bit intimidating, because like Will says, your knowledge and skill set has really kind of gone on an upward trajectory, without wanting to blow smoke up your backside too much.
Yeah, I don't do well with compliments, so that's why I swear and things like that. And I really firmly, anybody that tries to put me on a pedestal, I'm like, no, I'm just a dirty paramedic. Like, stop. I will jump off that pedestal. And I have said that to people so there's one friend of mine, many sim friends, because I try to make as many as I can. And they were like, well, I need to make a video till you so you don't make them all. And I said, no, you misunderstand me. I said, if I do anything and that keeps you from doing it, I have failed. I'm wanting you to do these things. I want you, because you're going to even if you do the very same skill, you're going to do it differently. And I'm going to watch it. I try to watch everybody's stuff. And I'm going to go, damn, didn't think of it that way. Or, ooh, I like that way, or whatever. So I get inspired by people. So if I do something and that makes somebody not do something, oh, dear God. It's also like the people that you said, I have to laugh, because anybody that knows me and thinks I'm intimidating, it's like, no, not really. Like, just walk up to me. If I put my cell phone number in almost every presentation we've ever done, right, Will? In live, and I'm like, in all seriousness.
I mean, I was talking about your skill sets rather than you as an individual. But.
Yes. But, okay. So as far as that, I have just failed really, really hard, and so that's the only reason I am a product of my failure. And so I just try to teach other people so that they don't fail. So, yeah.
And that's the educator in you, right? Coming through.
Mm-hmm.
What, Dave, what have you learned from Will?
Oh, Will is very, very talented. He's a great educator, and I learn calm, and I learn, how to approach things. And he's in a world that I have not been in. And it's really neat because in my current day job as well, there's a lot of things that we look at as sim rules and sim fundamentals, and you can't go against these things. But he and I have talked about, especially in my new job, is the environments we work in, the same rules don't work, but there's a reason why. And there's little things like in my current role, I'll say we can't have educators in the room, but it does work because of that environment. So just having a peek into his world and how he's approached and seeing how much he has grown and the skill set he has learned and his master's program and all of this stuff, it's just amazing. So I learn from him every time I talk to him.
It's so important, isn't it? Having like a sim kind of buddy or a sim peer to work with.
We're always bouncing ideas off each other, aren't we?
It's like we were teaching the other day. We teach an instructor course for simulation educators, and we were refining the taxonomy of verbs that we think people should probably use when they're describing the learning outcomes or objectives in simulation.
Yeah, so we run an exercise where they have to plan a very basic simulation session, and within that exercise they have to design a couple of learning outcomes. And when we ran it the first couple of times, we didn't put any
we didn't give them the example action verbs to use, and it made the task more difficult. But we put up the list of action verbs this time, and everyone's busy working away, and I'm looking at this list and I'm thinking,
I'm not happy with it.
Simulation breaks Bloom's taxonomy of learning in half. Like, it completely shreds it, and I'm not sure if there's an effective taxonomy of simulation action verbs, and maybe that's something that we should be thinking about as a community of simulation educators.
Seems like a paper that needs to be written, right?
Doesn't it? It goes back to your point, Will, is you're doing simulation because of the needs assessment that needs to be undertaken, and that's for me what the learning outcome is, right? What do you need to achieve from this? Then you need to design the learning outcome, and then the simulation comes after it. Not what a lot of, I guess, simulation naive or junior people do is go, all right, I've got to design a simulation, and then not think about what the learning outcomes are.
I've got this really great idea for a sim. Cool, but what's the point? Like, what's the purpose of it? You may have some crazy, awesome peri-arrest, more, the C-section that you're doing on the side of a highway somewhere. But if the target audience is nursing students, why? Why did you do this, right? And so making sure that we start with the learning objectives and then we build the scenario around that, right? The cool shit can come later. You'll find a time to introduce that. But going back to the earliest conversation we had today, not everything needs to be 100 miles an hour and everyone's going to die in the next 6 minutes if you don't fix them. Yeah. There's a lot of value in saying, you know what? This guy's not going to die even if you do everything wrong, but it's still important that we take care of him appropriately and we learn from it.
We just got donated this really cool bed that pronates. Okay. What do I care? Where's the learning objective? But we have this bed. We have to now use it.
Yeah, and your staff can't hand over properly to each other. So
quite.
So, what have you both learned from doing SimGeeks? I'll also be interested to, because we've got our little way that we've developed how to put the podcast together and coming up with ideas. How do you run SimGeeks?
So David and I we've been shoot from the hip pretty much from the beginning. When we first started out, it was just the two of us, and we were talking about certain subjects. And then as we grew, we started to bring in subject matter experts, and so we would have subjects, and we'd bring someone and we'd interview them, we'd talk about them. And then more recently, we've been kind of getting back to our roots and realized that we were having a lot more fun when it was just the two of us, or the two of us plus Matt and Phil. Right. Phil's of the Simulation Operative podcast, Matt Charnetsky, of course, from Dartmouth Hitchcock. And so the four of us have been doing the most recent ones, all of us together, because it falls into our normal Thursday Dungeons and Dragons session time slot. So that's what we've been doing. And so, one of the things I think that we've realized over the years, and this goes back to some of what David said a minute ago, is there is an endless amount of space for simulation podcasts. I don't think there's any competition. At least there shouldn't be amongst any of us. David and I have helped at least 2 or 3 other podcasts get off the ground over the last few years. I don't care if 100 more pop up next week. I think that podcasting is by far one of the easiest ways to continue a flow of free education, right? We're able to give information freely. We expect nothing in return. We've never even sold a time slot. Like, we don't do any advertising. We don't have any sponsorships. It's just the two of us getting together and just rambling on about whatever it is we want to share that week.
Not that we wouldn't be open to it.
Yeah. No, don't get me wrong. You want to throw money at us, I'll take it. We just haven't sought those opportunities, right?
Exactly. And it's not the aim. And it's not the aim of the exercise.
The amount of unsolicited experts that contact me on LinkedIn about promoting the channel and monetizing, and I'm like,
all the time.
You haven't looked at our channel, because that's not what we're about at all.
Yep. Not only that, but the number of unsolicited experts that are like, hey, I want to come on your podcast and talk about this thing. And it's like, you've never listened to us because we don't talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So that's my thing, is that a lot of people will invite themselves. And again, I am against none of those people. It's just that I go, okay, my first question is, what do my learners get out of listening to you?
Yeah.
Will they get me? And I'm like, okay, but what do they get that they can use in their everyday job? Because that's all we really care about is trying to give our listeners, I said our learners, but it's our listeners, what can they get out of this that they can take with them and hopefully use? So if it's just, we can all talk about each other, there are podcasts for that. And I do not begrudge them. They're friends of ours and they do great things. That's just not what we do. That's just not our format.
Yeah, sure. Fine. Interesting what you say about realizing that when you're in a room together, or when you're talking together, even if it's online and you don't have guests on, you have a different feel about it, because we've definitely felt that as well. There's
definitely a kind of guest, you kind of almost have to be on your best behavior a little bit, and you're not quite your normal selves, right? So yeah, I mean, what I want to see from you guys, I want to see the recording before the bit that you edit before that goes out. Now that's the bit I really want to see.
So we do pretty good. There are times where I'm like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that, and I have to go back and clip a few things, but it's pretty rare. In the past, it's usually when we have guests. If there's a guest, that takes what is normally an hour of editing and turns it into days of editing to get it done. And it's because we're trying to make them look as good as we can too, right? When it's just David and I very rarely watch my language. When it's other people on, I'm very careful about what I say, right? And so it is a totally different feel, even if you listen to us. But also the amount of work that goes into those episodes, because if you come join us, I want to make sure that you leave and you had a great experience and you feel like we represented you well as a person. And so, we give you an opportunity to say, let me know if you didn't say if you said anything you don't like, we'll take it out, right? Or is there anything about this that makes you uncomfortable? And we've had at least one, I can remember, maybe two, that we're like, you know what, we're going to throw this away and record again on a different day. Like, it just didn't make you look great. Let's try again. And so it is just a different feel when it's just David and I. People know what to expect from us, I think, at this point. I hope that's the case. And so we're a lot less filtered, right? It's just us talking about something and sharing information. I'm less careful about what I say.
But going on what you said about the pre-roll, every single time we go, God, why didn't we hit record earlier? And that's all we've missed is good content, because
we were having a conversation before we recorded, and in the back of my mind, as the post-production person, I'm like, why aren't we recording this?
Well, every time it's like, hey, what are we going to talk about today? And then we have the best conversation ever. And then you push record and everybody gets icy. It doesn't have the same thing. Like, you just said this way better earlier.
Yeah.
And so, making sure that, push record early, catch that stuff. Even if you can only use snippets of it as like, B-roll, that's where the raw conversation takes place, is when nobody's being like, no one's thinking about the conversation.
So you mentioned that you think that there's an infinite amount of space for people to do this around simulation in this area. What would your advice be to someone who's on the fence and thinking, I'd quite like to do a podcast, but I haven't taken that leap yet?
So I got a couple pieces. And the first one is, just like with anything else in simulation, don't buy into the idea that you need to spend thousands of dollars to get a podcast off the ground. David and I, obviously, we've gotten there over the last 6 years, and then some, I'm sure. But when we first started out, we had a couple of USB Yeti microphones and some cheap headphones, right? And that worked perfectly. We sounded great. And then slowly over time built into adding actual recording equipment and buying up a virtual studio and building our own space online. And now things are a little bit different for us and it's a lot more comfortable. But if you're just trying something out, it's no more than $100 or $200, right? Get into it with what you have available to you. People are going to listen. No one has ever once complained to us about audio quality, not one time, right? And there's been a few times where we've been on the fly and I've recorded with AirPods. Like it's just one of those things. And then the other thing is, don't be afraid to reach out. I think when we were first getting started, I wasn't quite comfortable reaching out to other podcasts because I was afraid that people would see it as competition, right? It was never that. It's never been that for us. The other podcasts at the time when we got started were all very cerebral. They were PhDs and doctorates, right? They had a completely different audience. They had a different subject matter than we do. We cover some of that stuff, but we cover it at a very elementary level, right? We're trying to get people into it easier. So if there's ever somebody out there that's like, hey, I want to start a sim podcast and it's specific to XYZ simulation, or I want to talk about simulation operations kind of like you guys do, call us. Like we will absolutely send you a list of shit that'll get you off the ground. We'll tell you what's worked for us, what hasn't worked for us. We will help those people because it doesn't take anything away from us to help others, right? Like it doesn't hurt us in any way.
It's just an extension of the educator mentality, isn't it? It's just a further.
And I think podcasting in general as well, and I've mentioned this on a previous episode, is built around community, isn't it? And you'll inevitably end up rubbing shoulders with other people who are kind of in the industry. And I guess that means that you're doing something right with the podcast if you're getting a little bit of attention. So,
what about you, Dave? I'm interested to know what's your kind of hot tips for people if they're budding podcasters and wanting to get into this space?
Stop thinking about it and do it. You're going to get so wrapped around the axle or so tied up into how to start and the right ways and all this. Our first episode is still downloaded, and please stop. It's awful. It's just.
I would
awful.
take it down, but David will not let me. Like, if I had my choice, I would take it down, and David's like, "Nope, it has to."
It's a rite of passage.
It is.
It's like
awful.
It's like
there's a Backstreet Boys reference in it.
Yeah, but it's like that assignment that you did for your undergraduate degree.
You read it back, you're like, I said what?
What was I thinking?
No, it's the same for us. Episode 1's cringing, but it's part of the history.
Go listen to ours. I'm telling you it was. But here's the thing. It was our start.
I'm so looking for that right now.
It was our start. It was our evolution, and we went from there. And if you think too much, so the one piece of advice is going to be just do it, get it going, and get it out there. Because the more you think about it, we have had long periods where either we get busy or we try to get too fancy. We try to overthink it. And that's what keeps us from making the content. And then, of course, we bumped it into people at our conferences, and they're like, are you seriously ever going to make an episode again? Yes, I promise you we will. But the other thing
and then we come home and we are on for like 4 weeks in a row, and then it slowly starts to trickle off again. So we need to go to more conferences where people harass us.
But the other thing is just like, one of my episodes that I was really passionate about is the You're Not Alone episode is, stop trying to do it by yourself. Reach out to all of us, because every single one of the sim podcasts out there is valid, has a space, and they want you there. And I've never met a single. The only thing I will say is there's a podcast that does not, and I don't want to call them out, but they don't post on Apple, and that's where I consume it. So I just want you to please list there. Please. I'm begging, because I want to listen to it, but I'm not going to download that other app. So I'm stingy like that. But so like if I can, help you guys out with that, or if there's anything we can do, every single one of the podcasters wants to help.
Just out of interest, how do you send out your podcast to the different providers? Do you have a platform for that?
So what we did was, in the beginning, you used to have to go to a whole bunch of different places and register it. But once you do, you're done. So like Apple is, and I'm a kind of a stats nut that 56 to 60% of our listeners comes off of the Apple platform. So if I see somebody that's missing that much of the listeners, I'm like, seriously, like, I just want to help you, please. Just like in Sim, it's like, just let me help you. But so the registration process with Apple is a little bit of a pain, but like once you do it, it's done. Like we did it years ago, and now I don't have to do anything. Our RSS feed just kicks it out to all of that, and it does it for us.
Okay.
Spotify was the same way. We had to go through a process. I set everything up in the early days, and then it just auto sends out. So we use a hosting platform called Podbean. I don't know if you guys are using something similar. So that's where all of our stuff is housed, and then it communicates out to all of these other places.
Yeah.
And we just had to basically click a link, fill out the application, submit all the information, and then once we got our approval, it started automatically uploading out to those.
Yeah,
So we just pay for that every year.
We use something similar. We use something called Transistor, which was recommended to us by the university because someone and somewhere else is doing a podcast that uses a similar thing, and it's the same kind of thing. I think Apple's probably the one that you still have to jump through a couple of hoops, but it guides you through that nicely. And yeah, you just upload it and it just shoves it out. But again, just put it out to as many people as possible.
Yeah, because we all want to hear it. We want to hear it.
Awesome.
Guys, great. I think we're probably edging towards the amount of acceptable time before our podcast can't go for any longer. We had this conversation the other day that we're not good enough yet to go any longer for a long form conversation.
We don't think we've earned the right to go over 45 minutes.
Well, other than the fact
Dave, what are you going to say?
There will be an episode 2 to this because we need to have these gentlemen
I was going to say we're
our podcast.
Yes,
well,
please.
We hope we can give your listeners something in return. When we're going to go by your rules there, Dave. That we're not just coming on for.
Yep. Oh, I've already thought of a few different topics. So yeah, we'll be good. Trust me.
Excellent stuff.
Dave, Will, the SimGeeks guys, thank you so much for coming on SimCast.
It's been a blast.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys. We really appreciate it.
Amazing. And I hope you've enjoyed listening. And if you'd like to keep in touch with all things Sim, please give us a follow, give us a like, and we'll see you on the next one. So thanks very much, everyone, and bye for now.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.